Oh, you just really want to talk about your things before we really think about the vibe? I understand, Aubrey. Fine, we'll get started then. Hi, hello, my name is Mason. Eternally rushed.
Wow, I am gooped, gagged, and appalled by my co-host behavior, Aubrey. And
And
what are we talking
hi,
about?
spooky episode. Ooh.
We were continuing our spooky month into the next month, as we mentioned last time, just in case you weren't here for that, just because we have some more things we want to talk about.
We have too much to talk about. I don't care. October, you
I,
tried to choke me out, but guess what? I'm not done yet.
and spooky things should not be limited to October. I like to leave Halloween decor up year round.
Mm-hmm. She does. It's like a graveyard in there, and it's pretty great.
All right, so
No, you're so pumped.
I
Yeah, you ready? No intro?
yeah,
No
I
cap?
am, but I thought of another thing to go along with it while I was sitting here too, because you got really aggressive and that made me think of something
I'm sorry I got so
else.
aggressive, but also you're welcome I got so aggressive?
Yeah. Anyways, so last week I talked about some haunted doll TikTok stuff,
Oh
and
boy.
that made me think about some other stuff that I wanted to talk about today. Specifically, we're all familiar with the Twilight Zone, an American classic television show.
Oh yes.
This is specifically, I want to mention an episode. This is from the original Twilight Zone. So this episode is from 1963. Season
Wait,
5,
that shit's
episode
that old?
6, to be exact. Yeah,
Wait,
it's old.
how old is Twilight?
Twilight.
Yeah, the Twilight Zone, Twilight.
Twilight.
That's the one with the sparkling vampires, right? And like the werewolf that likes babies.
The Twilight Zone aired first in October of 1959, and it ran.
Wait, so that shit's as old as Doctor Who?
It ran till 1964, so 5 seasons. So this is the last season until, and it's had a lot of reboots. We've had a Twilight Zone movie now.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of stuff as far as like Twilight Zone.
Then
Also, if you've ever been to Disney World, I don't think the one that Disneyland has the Tower of Terror anymore. I think they tore it down. But they still have a Tower of Terror in Hollywood Studios Disney
Yup.
World.
Been
And
there.
that is a Twilight Zone themed ride. I really love it, even though I'm not a super big heights jumpy person. It's all indoors, so it's a little easier, and also I love the decor. Like
A1 stuff. Incredible. Honestly, half of the ride is the walk into it. They really thematics.
And
it's perfect. That
fun
aesthetic.
fact: anyone who knows anything about working for Disney World knows the most coveted job in the park is working for the Tower of Terror, because it's the one job in the park where you don't smile. Like
You're
you
right.
should look upset and ghoulish the whole day. And so that's like everyone that has worked there has said that's usually the most requested job, and it's like impossible to get. Anyways, that was a sidetrack, but
Interesting.
this episode is called The Living Doll, and I distinctly remember this episode because it was one of, like, as soon as I started to show interest in spooky things, my mom would slowly show me things that she thought I would like, and she wanted to keep things a little milder at first, so she would show me a lot of, like, old school Twilight Zone episodes, or, like, old 80s horror movies, which, you know, weren't as spooky. I mean, I still thought they were really spooky, even though it was, you know, way past their
Scariness, horror is exponential at a young age. Like, the younger you are, it's, the more you have to get more accustomed to it. And for some reason, when you're just younger, that stuff hits harder. I don't know. Honestly still don't understand why.
We just have so much more imagination about what could be real, and as adults, we're jaded on that. Like, when I watch Nightmare on Elm Streets now, like the old ones, I laugh because I love watching these old special effects and like how that was crazy scary to people in the 80s, and even to me as a teen in 2016, that was crazy. Like,
honestly, I just remember people trying to force me to watch that kind of stuff when I was younger, and it has taken until now for it to actually work. So obviously it must get easier.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, this episode was definitely, this was something. Twilight Zone is not extremely scary, but it is pretty unsettling a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Twilight Zone falls into a liminal space. Like the Twilight Zone is the liminal space.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's a place that should not exist. It's a place between space and time, or everything they say in the intro. All
Yeah.
weird, unsettling, creepy shit's floating around.
Yeah, and the eyeball.
The Living Doll episode was the 126th episode of The Twilight Zone, and in this episode, a dysfunctional family's problems are made worse when the child's doll proves to be sentient. I'm gonna be reading a lot of this plot stuff and fact stuff from the Wikipedia page for this particular episode.
Okay, but the research paper is not going to get graded as well if you admit that, Aubrey. You better find some other sources to cite.
I just want to say, we all know that every single one of us, even the bestest scholars, used Wikipedia for their research papers. You know they'd be looking at Wikipedia and then just pretending they didn't and pulling from Wikipedia's sources.
You know, I can't say I'm any different. And I can't say many. I can't say I've talked to many people who are either. Could you imagine if there was a Wikipedia book that you could buy, like the dictionary, or like an encyclopedia?
Would it automatically update every time somebody changed something?
No, that would be the yearly editions. There would be rewrites and stuff like that.
I would buy it if it was a particularly funny year.
Particularly funny year, like a lot of stuff happened. So it would be kind of like a pop culture book, like this year in, like these are the updates to these pages that went out, but then also here are new things that happened. So it's almost kind of like a year in pop-up book plus patch notes to history.
Year in history patch notes.
Yeah. So it turns out,
this year we stopped appreciating Christopher Columbus. Except they add that one every year.
yeah, like halfway through it kind of slides back, but then at the end, like, no, actually, we're done with Christopher Columbus
we went
again.
back to hating him.
We're back, guys.
So in this particular episode of Twilight Zone that we were discussing, this premise was especially fascinating to me because I grew up in the era of Baby Alive reboot, where Baby Alive could talk and eat and poop and do like way more than Baby Alive could the first time around.
Is that really what it was called?
Baby Alive, a baby so real.
See, that's
that's probably trademarked the way I did it.
But yeah, I think you just got us.
Baby Alive.
You just got us in trouble.
Please don't sue us, Mattel. I think Mattel came up with that. I don't know. But yeah, so my mom knew. Speaking of, my mother was calling me. My mom knew that would be something I would be fascinated by. And in this episode, basically this woman, Annabelle, buys her daughter Christy a wind-up doll named Talkie Tina. It says Talkie, but I'm pretty sure it was Talking Tina.
No, like Taaki, right? The Talkie Tina?
Talkie's Tina. Hey girl, could you come over here and give me $1? I need another $1 for the vending machine. I'm out of Talkies.
Talkie Tina. At your local department store. First bag of Talkies.
Fingers are covered in little red dust.
And if you lick her, your tongue will fall off.
Your tongue will literally catch fire.
Mm-hmm.
So Annabelle buys Talkie Tina, not to be confused with Talkie Tina. And when wound, the doll says, "My name is Talkie Tina, and I love you very much." Annabelle recently remarried to an infertile man named Eric Strader, I believe. Eric Strader. I did not know that that was like he was infertile and that's where all his anger comes from. But he's frustrated that he can't have kids with Annabelle, so he directs all his hostility to Christy, like her little daughter. Like, and Christy's like 8 or 9. Like, she does not deserve this bad vibes that Eric is putting out. I thought it was Elric. It's Eric. It's just spelled E-R-I-C-H.
Elric, huh? That's interesting that you would say that of all names. Have you
I don't know.
ever have you ever heard an Elric before?
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with this game called Skyrim. Maybe you've played it. Makes me think of Elfric. Is it Elfric?
Oh. Well, I'm pretty sure there is also just straight up an Elric that's also a nerd thing that I wasn't sure if you know or not.
Oh, no, I don't.
I think that's one of the main characters of Full Metal Alchemist, if I'm not mistaken. Now I'm gonna check. Yeah, oh no, they're the Elwick, that's their last name. Edward and
Ulrich?
Alphonse. Alphonse and Eric Elric. Edward, sorry. Anyway, that's just her last name. This is super off track. What were you talking about?
So back to Eric, who can't love his stepdaughter Christy for some god-awful reason because he feels emasculated that he can't have kids.
I see.
Annabelle
it's really hard for him.
Tries to tell him, like, hey, if you give Christy the chance, like, you'll really bond with her and, like, connect with her. Which also, Annabelle, girl, you should not have to convince some man that he can love a child as his own. That should be a red flag right there.
It should be a given.
He's not the man for you and your child. You and Christy need to get out of there because you all deserve better. Talkie Tina included. She also deserves better because you know what? She's a bad bitch.
She is?
When Eric winds up the doll, when no one else is around, it substitutes its catchphrase with antagonisms such as, I don't like you. At first, Eric blames the doll's manufacturer. However, when the doll begins engaging him in more elaborate conversation, he comes to the conclusion that Annabelle is playing a trick on him to get back at him for his treatment of Christy. Which also should tell you, Eric, that maybe the way you treat Christy isn't okay because you think that your new wife's trying to get back at you for your bad behavior. Like, then you're admitting it's bad behavior.
Also,
anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have the awareness that it is bad behavior. You're able to process that and make judgments based off of it about other things. Like, if you're aware of it, maybe you should do something about it, dude.
So he just keeps getting more mad and mad at this doll, and the doll is, like, kind of antagonizing him when no one's around. Not even, like, it's literally the doll is sitting there, and it's just doing its catchphrases in different ways. So that's what's really unsettling about it, is the doll's not even doing anything. It's just pissing him off with words. Like, it gets to the point where he literally gets so mad, he puts it between a vice, like, in the garage, and tries to, like, destroy it, and it doesn't, like, he can't do it. So he places the doll in a trash can in the garage, and then receives a phone call and hears the doll's voice saying, I'm talking Tina, and I'm going to kill you. Which is so unsettling! After he checks the trash can, guess what, bitch? It's empty! He goes to confront Annabelle, and she's obviously like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, chill, you're being literally crazy.
That is... Oh.
And then it occurs, maybe since his wife was upstairs, putting Christy to bed, that she couldn't have possibly made the phone ring. So, he runs upstairs, and he finds the doll in bed with Christy. He takes the doll away against Christy's will. Obviously, she's, like, crying, and she calls him daddy, and he corrects her. Like, it's so terrible. Like,
that is strange.
Yeah. Ooh.
I don't like that.
This is when he attempts to destroy the doll using a vice, a blowtorch, and a circular saw, all to no effect. He ties the doll in a burlap sack and returns it to the trash can, weighing the lid with bricks. Annabelle at this point is like, you're insane.
Yeah.
And hateful and terrible, so she's packing up to go. And she says, Eric, maybe you need to see a psychiatrist. So then he starts beginning to question whether the doll talking to him was his imagination. So he gives the doll back to Christy, and he begs Annabelle to, like, let him stay, or, like, to stay with him and stuff. And later that night,
Oh no.
Hear some kind of muffled noises. Later we find out those noises are when you wind up Tina, she also kind of moves a little bit, and you can hear the like of a
The
wind up toy,
whirring
kind of
noise of the
that
toy
whirring,
moving, yeah.
and that's the muffled noise he's hearing. He tells Annabelle to stay in the bedroom and leaves to investigate. Christy is in bed, but Tina is gone. He goes down the stairs, and halfway down the stairs, Tina is laying on the stairs, and he slips and falls, sustaining fatal injuries.
Oh god.
Attracted to the noise, Annabelle finds Eric's body. Beside him is Tina, who opens her eyes and says, "My name is Talking Tina, and you better be nice to me." Shocking Annabelle.
Better be nice or I'll push you down the stairs. Okay.
The opening narration for this is
No.
Talkie Tina, a lifelike doll that does everything. Creation of plastic and springs and painted smile. To Eric Strader, she is a most unwelcome addition to his household, but without her, he'd never enter the Twilight Zone.
Can we talk about the fact that the introduction guy for the Twilight Zone always sounds like he's on like SVU or some shit?
I love his voice.
Like, I love his voice, but he sounds like he's talking about the wind up to like some like investigation to a murder case or something. It's so.
Oh yeah, well to be fair,
like Unsolved Mysteries, maybe Unsolved
the
Mysteries.
closing narration for this is, of course we all know dolls can't really talk, and they can't commit murder. But to a child caught in the middle of turmoil and conflict, a doll can become many things. Friend, defender, guardian. Especially a doll like Talkie Tina, who did talk and did commit murder in the misty region of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
I was just like, I love that episode of Twilight Zone because it's scary without being inappropriate or like satanic or like, you know, there's not really, you could show that episode to anybody and they couldn't really find something to be like, well, that's offensive. You know what I mean? Like, it's just unsettling and spooky. Like,
it's you know what it is.
The doll just is the doll. Like, it acts like its normal doll self. It doesn't do anything possessed like.
Well, what's
because when it's on the stairs, it's just on the stairs.
Well, I think that's a really important part of the Twilight Zone too. From like what I have seen of it, is like it's not some other force coming in and swooping in to fuck with somebody. It's kind of like the person's demise is caused by their own actions 99% of the time. I think I remember this one Twilight episode that was Twilight Zone episode. I don't remember what it was titled, but it was this one where a guy was like brought to heaven and he was living his best life and he could like gamble all the time. He had like hot ladies around him and shit like that. The god or angel that was there with him was talking to him and was like, well, can I like leave? Can we like do something else? I'm getting kind of like bored of all this like gambling and hookers and shit. And the angel just went, oh, no, you can't do that. You have to stay here. And the dude was like, well, what the hell? Why are you like imprisoning me in my own heaven? And the angel was like, oh, this isn't heaven. You're in hell.
Fucking hell.
That's all I remember though. That's like that's the episode that pops into my head whenever that show gets mentioned.
I got one more thing to tell you about, and then we can go for our break. And over the break, I'm gonna make you watch what I'm about to tell you about.
Okay, what do you need to show me?
So this one, I have not seen the full movie. My mom just showed me this clip, again, as one of those things that she was like, oh, you're gonna love this. This movie is from 1975. It's called Trilogy of Terror. It was an American made-for-television anthology horror film, so like all little separate plots.
Understood.
There's 3 plots, and the third one is the one that I watched, called Amelia. This is directly, again, from the Trilogy of Terror's Wikipedia page. Amelia was filmed like a one-woman play with Karen Black as the only actor. It was also the only film of the three whose the only film of the three little separate parts whose script was written by the original author of the story. Amelia is based on Richard Matheson's 1969 short story Prey, apparently.
Okay.
I didn't know that. Amelia lives alone in a high-rise apartment building. She returns home after a fateful shopping spree carrying a package containing a wooden fetish doll. I wouldn't call it that. I would just call it a wooden tribal doll.
Well, you know,
I wouldn't call it a fetish doll, but apparently Wikipedia would.
Well, that's just an old saying. We've repurposed that word for different things nowadays.
Yeah. It is crafted in the form of a misshapen Aboriginal warrior with pointy sharp teeth and a spear. A scroll comes along with the doll, claiming that the doll contains the actual spirit of Zuni Hunter, named He Who Kills, and the gold chain adorning the doll keeps the spirit trapped within. As Amelia makes a call to her mother, we learn that she suffers from her mother's overbearing behavior. Amelia struggles to justify her independence and cancels their plans for the evening, claiming she has a date. As Amelia leaves the room, we see that the Zuni fetish doll's golden chain has somehow fallen off.
Oh, his chain.
Later, Amelia is prepping for dinner using a carving knife. She enters the darkened living room and sees the doll not on the coffee table. She hears a noise in the kitchen and investigates. The knife is missing. Returning to the living room, she is suddenly attacked by the doll, which stabs at her ankles viciously. They basically play cat and mouse all over the apartment for a little while, and eventually the doll overtakes her body in the end.
Okay, I don't know why you had to say it like that, but thank you.
Yeah, it's like the spirit of the doll went into her.
Oh, so she gets possessed.
What is so fucking hilarious about this is the doll literally the whole time is like...
That is not scanning. That is
entire time.
Yeah, that audio did not hit at all, but thank you. Thank you.
Maybe you could just cut it out and then replace it with the doll screaming, because I can't do it justice. It's
that also works.
Too funny.
That is also fine.
But it is also a really good spooky doll thing if you're going to go watch it. I didn't want to give everything away because there's some really good creepy parts in it that are just woo, like while she's getting chased around the apartment and
yeah,
because this thing is
all
literally
sorts
like
of hijinks.
this big, like the size of your face, and it's terrifying but also so cute and murdery.
Yeah.
At one point she's like in the bathroom and it starts like stabbing under the door with the little knife.
Kind of like a cat.
It's like when your cat, puts its paws under the door, you know? Anyways.
Yikes.
We're gonna take a break and we'll come back with another spooky story.
Yeah, and I'm gonna see what this little thing looks like and be scared. So get ready. I'm gonna be terrified. Hope you like it. And we're back. Creepy doll stuff.
We thoroughly enjoyed reading a story, like that creepy story last week, and so we thought we'd give it another go. Sadly, this one doesn't have as much dialogue, which is a bummer, 'cause I enjoyed doing the different voices last time, but all good.
Well. Instead, we will
popcorn read this like we're back in middle school.
You ready? I wish I was reading something like this in middle school. Can you believe how this starts?
Yeah.
Okay, so this one's more of an actual creepypasta story, another recommendation from our resident horror fiend, Fern. It's a good alliteration. They actually told me about this story, and then after our last episode, I had it pulled up for thinking about this one, and they wanted to read the story so bad again that I just scrolled it for them while they read and I worked on the podcast.
So it must be pretty good.
Must be worth it. Anyway, I pulled this directly off of the Creepypasta wiki. Just didn't want to have that page pulled up, so I've got it on a Google Doc instead. It's our script. I'm ready to go. This first line is very intriguing, so I'm just ready to get right into this. So, spooky story number 2. Settle in the campfire for NOENDHouse. I have not read this. Let me just start by saying that Peter Terry was addicted to heroin.
We were friends in college and continue to be after I graduated. Notice that I said I. He dropped out after 2 years of barely cutting it. I moved out of the dorms and into a small apartment. I didn't see Peter as much. We would talk online every now and then. AIM was king in pre-Facebook years. There was a period where he wasn't online for about 5 weeks straight. I was worried. He was a pretty notorious flake and drug addict, so I assumed he just stopped caring. Then one night, I saw him log on. Before I could initiate a conversation, he sent me a message.
David, we need to talk.
That was when he told me about the NOENDHouse. It got that name because no one had ever reached the final exit. The rules are pretty simple and cliche. Reach the final room of the building and you win $500. There were 9 rooms in all. The house was located outside the city, roughly 4 miles away from my house. Apparently Peter had tried and failed. He was a heroin and who the fuck knows what addict, so I figured the drugs got the best of him and he wigged out at a paper ghost or something. He told me it would be too much for anyone, that it was unnatural.
I didn't believe him. I told him I would check it out the next night, no matter how hard he tried to convince me otherwise. $500 sounded too good to be true. I had to go. I set out the following night. Why did his friend bring this back up to him out of nowhere just to tell him not to go? This man was baiting him. Just to tell him.
Just to tell him don't go, and also I couldn't do it.
Also, could you imagine, did it state in here that that people died at this thing? Like, this is too scary?
No, they just said that people didn't make it all the way through. Obviously, people don't die in there if he made it out.
I don't know.
Sounds like it may just like mentally fuck them up, but we'll see.
We'll see. Let's let the story tell itself now.
When I arrived, I immediately noticed something strange about the building. Have you ever seen or read something that shouldn't be scary, but for some reason a chill crawls up your spine? I walked toward the building, and the feeling of uneasiness only intensified as I opened the front door.
My heart slowed, and I let a relieved sigh leave me as I entered. The room looked like a normal hotel lobby decorated for Halloween. A sign was posted in place of a worker. It read, "Room 1 this way. 8 more follow. Reach the end and you win." I chuckled and made my way to the first door.
First area was almost laughable. The decor resembled the Halloween aisle of a Kmart, complete with sheet ghosts and animatronic zombies that gave a static growl when you passed by. At the far end was an exit. It was the only door besides the one I entered through. I brushed through the fake spider webs and headed for the second room.
I was greeted by a fog as I opened the door to room 2. The room definitely upped the ante in terms of technology. Not only was there a fog machine, but a bat hung from the ceiling and flew in circles. Scary. They seemed to have a Halloween soundtrack that one would find in a 99-cent store on loop somewhere in the room. I didn't see a stereo, but I guess they must have used a PA system. I stepped over a few toy rats that wheeled around and walked with a puffed chest around to the next area.
I reached for the doorknob and my heart sank to my knees. I did not want to open that door. A feeling of dread hit me so hard I could barely even think. Logic overtook me after a few terrified moments, and I shook it off and entered the next room.
Door 3 is where things began to change.
On the surface, it looked like a normal room. There was a chair in the middle of the wood-paneled floor. A single lamp in the corner did a poor job of lighting the area, casting a few shadows across the floor and walls. That was the problem. Shadows. Plural.
With the exception of the chairs, there were others. I had barely walked in the door and I was already terrified. It was at that moment that I knew something wasn't right. I didn't even think as I automatically tried to open the door I came through. It was locked from the other side.
That set me off. Was someone locking the doors as I progressed? There was no way. I would have heard them. Was it a mechanical lock that set automatically? Maybe, but I was too scared to really think. I turned back to the room and the shadows were gone. The chair's shadow remained, but the others were gone. I slowly began to walk. I used to hallucinate when I was a kid, so I wrote off the shadows as a figment of my imagination. I began to feel better as I made it to the halfway point of the room. I looked down as I took my steps, and that's when I saw it.
Or didn't see it. My shadow wasn't there. I didn't have time to scream. I ran as fast as I could to the other door and flung myself without thinking into the room beyond.
The fourth room was possibly the most disturbing. As I closed the door, all light seemed to be sucked out and put back into the previous room. I stood there, surrounded by darkness, not able to move. I'm not afraid of the dark and never have been, but I was absolutely terrified. All sight had left me. I held my hand in front of my face, and if I didn't know what I was doing, I would have never been able to tell. Darkness doesn't describe it. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silence. When you're in a soundproof room, you can still hear yourself breathing. You can hear yourself being alive. I couldn't.
I began to stumble forward after a few moments. My rapid beating heart was the only thing I could feel. There was no door in sight. Wasn't even sure there was one this time. The silence was then broken by a low hum.
I felt something behind me. I spun around wildly, but could barely even see my nose. I knew it was there, though. Regardless of how dark it was, I knew something was there. The hum grew louder, closer. It seemed to surround me, but I knew whatever was causing the noise was in front of me, inching closer. I took a step back. I had never felt that kind of fear. I can't really describe true fear. I wasn't even scared I was going to die. I was scared of what the alternative was. I was afraid of what this thing had in store for me. Then the lights flashed for a second and I saw it.
Nothing. I saw nothing, and I know I saw nothing there. The room was again plunged into darkness, and the hum began a wild screech. I screamed in protest. I couldn't hear this goddamn sound for another minute. I ran backwards, away from the noise, and fumbled for the door handle. I turned and fell into room 5.
Before I describe room 5, you have to understand something. I am not a drug addict. I have no history of drug abuse or any sort of psychosis short of the childhood hallucinations I mentioned earlier. And those were only when I was really tired or just waking up. I had entered the NOENDHouse with a clear head.
After falling from the previous room, my view of room 5 was from my back, looking up at the ceiling. What I saw didn't scare me, it simply surprised me. Trees had grown into the room and towered over my head. The ceilings in this room were taller than the others, which made me think I was in the center of the house. I got up off the floor and dusted myself, took a look around. It was definitely the biggest room of them all. I couldn't see the door from where I was. Various bushes and trees must have blocked my line of sight with the exit.
But to this point, I figured the rooms were going to get scarier, but this was a paradise compared to the last room. I also assumed whatever was in room 4 stayed back there. I was incredibly wrong.
As I made my way deeper into the room, I began to hear what one would hear if they were in a forest. Chirping bugs and the occasional flap of birds seemed to be my only company in this room. It was the thing that bothered me the most. I heard bugs and other animals, but I didn't see any of them. I began to wonder how big this house was. From the outside, when I first walked up to it, it looked like a regular house. It was definitely on the bigger side, but it was almost a full forest in here. The canopy covered my view of the ceiling, and I assumed that it was still there, however high it was. I couldn't see any walls either. The only way I knew I was still inside was that the floor matched the other rooms, standard dark wood paneling.
I kept walking, hoping that the next tree I passed would reveal the door. After a few moments of walking, I felt a mosquito fly onto my arm. I shook it off and kept going. A second later, I felt about 10 more land on my skin at different places. I felt them crawl up and down my arms and legs, and a few made their way across my face. I flailed wildly to get them off, but they just kept crawling. I looked down and let out a muffled scream, or more of a whimper, to be honest. I didn't see a single bug. Not one bug was on me, but I could feel them crawl. I heard them fly by my face and sting my skin, but I couldn't see a single one. I dropped to the ground and began to roll wildly. I was desperate. I hated bugs, especially ones I couldn't see or touch, and these bugs could touch me, but these bugs could touch me, and they were everywhere.
I began to crawl. I had no idea where I was going. The entrance was nowhere in sight, and I still hadn't even seen the exit. So I just crawled, my skin wriggling in the presence of those phantom bugs. After what seemed like hours, I found the door. I grabbed the nearest tree and propped myself up, mindlessly slapping my arms and legs to no avail. I tried to run, but I couldn't. My body was exhausted from crawling and dealing with whatever it was that was on me. I took a few shaky steps to the door, grabbing each tree on the way for support.
It was only a few feet away when I heard it, the low hum from before. It was coming from the next room, and it was deeper. I could almost feel it inside my body, like when you stand up next to an amp at a concert. The feeling of the bugs on me lessened as the hum grew louder. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, the bugs were completely gone, but I couldn't bring myself to turn the knob. I knew that if I let go, the bugs would return, and there was no way I would make it back to room 4. I just stood there, my head pressed against the door marked 6, my hand shakily grasping the knob. The hum was so loud I couldn't even hear myself pretend to think. There was nothing I could do but move on. Room 6 was next, and room 6 was hell.
I closed the door behind me, my eyes held shut and my ears ringing. The hum was surrounding me. As the door clicked into place, the hum was gone. I opened my eyes in surprise, and the door I had shut was gone too. It's just a wall now. I looked around in shock. The room is identical to room 3, the same chair and lamp, but in the correct amount of shadows this time. The only real difference, there was no exit door, and the one I came in through was gone. As I said before, I had no previous issues in terms of mental instability, but at that moment I fell into what I now know was insanity. I didn't scream. I didn't make a sound.
At first, I scratched softly. The wall was tough, but I knew the door was there somewhere. I just knew it was. I scratched where the doorknob was. I clawed at the wall frantically with both hands, my nails being filed down to the skin against the wood. I fell silently to my knees. The only sound in the room, the incessant scratching against the wall. I knew it was there. The door was there. I knew it was just there. I knew if I could just get past this wall.
Are you alright?
I jumped off the ground and spun in one motion. I leaned against the wall behind me, and I saw what it was that spoke to me. I regret ever turning around.
There was a little girl. She was wearing a soft white dress that went down to her ankles. She had long, blonde hair to the middle of her neck, and white skin with blue eyes. She was the most frightening thing I had ever seen, and I know that nothing in my life will ever be as unnerving as what I saw in her. While looking at her, I saw something else. Where she stood, I saw what looked like a man's body, only larger than normal and covered in hair. He was naked from head to toe, but his head was not human, and his toes were hooves? It wasn't the devil, but at that moment it might as well have been. The form had the head of a ram and the snout of a wolf.
It was horrifying, and it was synonymous with the little girl in front of me. They were the same form. I can't really describe it, but I saw them at the same time. They shared the same spot in that room. but it was like looking at two separate dimensions. When I saw the girl, I saw the form, and when I saw the form, I saw the girl. I couldn't speak. I could barely even see. My mind was revolting against what it was attempting to process. I had been scared before in my life, but I had never been more scared than when I was trapped in the 4th room. But that was before room 6. I just stood there, staring at whatever it was that spoke to me. There was no exit. I was trapped here with it, and then it spoke to me again.
David, you should have listened.
When it spoke, I heard the words of the little girl, but the other form spoke through my mind in a voice I won't even attempt to describe. There was no other sound. The voice just kept repeating the sentence over and over in my mind, and I agreed. I didn't know what to do. I was slipping into madness, yet I couldn't take my eyes off what was in front of me. I dropped to the floor. I thought I had passed out, but the room wouldn't let me. I just wanted it to end. I was on my side, my eyes wide open, and the form staring down at me. Scurrying across the floor in front of me was one battery-powered rat from the 2nd room. The house was toying with me.
The house was toying with me. But for some reason, seeing that rat pulled my mind back from whatever depths it was headed to. And I looked around the room. I was getting out of there. I was determined to get out of that house and live and never think about this place ever again. I knew this room was hell, and I wasn't ready to take up a residency. At first, it was just my eyes that moved. I searched the walls for any kind of opening. The room wasn't that big, so it didn't take long to soak up the entire layout. The demon still taunted me, voice growing louder as the form stayed and rooted where it stood. I placed my hand on the floor, lifted myself up to all fours, and turned to scan the wall behind me.
Then I saw something I couldn't believe. The form was now right out my back, whispering into my mind how I shouldn't have come. I felt its breath on the back of my neck, but I refused to turn around. A large rectangle was scratched into the wood with a small dent chipped away at the center of it. Right in front of my eyes, I saw the large 7 I had mindlessly etched into the wall. I knew what it was. Room 7 was just beyond that wall where room 5 was moments ago. I don't know how I'd done it. Maybe it was just my state of mind at the time, but I had created the door. I knew I had. In my madness, I had scratched into the wall what I needed most, an exit to the next room. Room 7 was close. I knew the demon was right behind me, but for some reason I couldn't touch it. I closed my eyes and placed both hands on the large 7 in front of me. I pushed as hard as I could. The demon was now screaming in my ear. It told me I was never leaving. It told me that this wasn't the end, but I wasn't going to die. I was going to live there in room 6 with it. I wasn't. I pushed and screamed at the top of my lungs. I knew I was going to push through the wall eventually.
I clenched my eyes shut and screamed, and the demon was gone. I was left in silence. I turned around slowly to be greeted by the room as it was when I entered. Just a chair and a lamp. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't have time to. I turned back to the 7 and jumped back slightly. What I saw was a door. It wasn't the one I had scratched in, but just a regular door with a large 7 on it. My whole body was shaking. It took me a while to turn the knob. Just stood there, staring at that door. Couldn't stay in room 6. I couldn't. But if this was only room 6, I couldn't imagine what 7 had in store. I must have stood there for an hour just staring at the 7. Finally, with a deep breath, I twisted the knob and opened the door to room 7.
I stumbled through the door, mentally exhausted and physically weak. The door behind me closed and I realized where I was. I was outside. Not like room 5 outside, but actually outside. My eyes stung. I wanted to cry. I fell to my knees and tried, but I couldn't. I was finally out of that hell. I didn't even care about the prize that was promised. I turned and saw that the door I just went through was the entrance. I walked to my car and drove home, thinking how nice a shower sounded.
As I pulled up to my house, I felt uneasy. The joy of leaving NOENDHouse had faded, and dread was slowly building in my stomach. I shook it off as residual from the house and made my way to the front door. I entered and immediately went up to my room. There on my bed was my cat, Baskerville. Hi, Baskerville. He was the first thing I had seen all night, and I